mean, every day was pretty brutal. And we were completely unsupported. Going into the middle of Antarctica was like going into Mordor. I mean, if there was a problem, you really are, you're in trouble.
Hello everyone. Today we are very lucky to be chatting with Justin Packshaw, an entrepreneur, philanthropist and adventurer. Justin has just come back from his latest expedition, Chasing the Light. He was working with NASA, Stafford University and the European Space Agency, travelling from coast to coast of Antarctica, collecting environmental, mental health and physiological data. Wow. Congratulations, Justin, on this amazing achievement. How are you feeling after coming back home? Nice to be back with home comforts, I'm sure.
Yeah, elated, I think, Lizzie, thank you. Look, it was a long trip, old school adventure, really, so long in duration, quite audacious in objective. And the long ones, certainly in somewhere like Antarctica, where it's quite one-dimensional in that it's, the scenery is all white and pretty brutal. Home comforts are a big sort of pipe dream that you hold on to. So yeah, fabulous being home, fabulous. And also we did so much research. It was a sort of scientific trip, and sort of starting to look at that data and analysing that data is going to be fascinating. So we were a team of two, so we're both quite keen to see what all that kicks up.
And I was going to ask as well, how many sort of hours of sleep were you averaging a night, would you say?
Sleep. So we were kite skiing. We man-hauling and kite skiing. We did about 2,500 kilometers. So we went from the sort of eastern side of Antarctica, so sort of directly below South Africa, Cape Town, and then we did a sort of horizontal crossing to the South Pole. And we were kite skiing, and with the kiting, we'd probably kite between 6 and 8 hours a day.
Wow.
But once you start, before you start, you've got to obviously take your home down, your tent down. We were unsupported, so we were carrying everything ourselves in sledges behind us. And then when you stop, you've got to do the same thing. You've got to build your home. But to answer your question, yeah, basically we would probably sleep. Well, everything was being recorded. So we were working with NASA and the European Space Agency through Stafford University. So all our sort of physiology and psychology was being tested all the time. We had lots of smart technology on us, so we knew exactly how much we slept. And I, on average, slept about 6 hours, but Jamie slept about nearly 8 hours. It's sort of funny living. You've always got an ear outside to what the wind's doing, and so we rested, but it's, you're in pretty bleak. Our tent was pretty small, we slept all right.
And so mental health research, environmental science, gathering educational content are just some of the intended targets of this adventure. What for you personally was the most important?
Well, I think all of it. I mean, when you start looking at what the human can do, I mean, humans are meant to excel, and I've really witnessed that. I mean, I've done this for an awful long time. I've been to the four corners of the world, and I'm fascinated with pushing myself and sort of trying to bring the best out in other people. And so I think all the research, if we could put it into one area, was fantastic. Our physiology, that is very interesting. So basically, we were giving samples of blood, stool, urine, and saliva once a week. We did that 3 months before, and we do it for 3 months afterwards. I think I'm right in saying that Jamie and I are currently the most highly tested individuals on the planet. Technology, there's masses of things that you can look at. One, the ageism thing. I'm in my late 50s, Jamie's in his early 30s. So, how, when you really put your body under a lot of stress, the sort of human endeavor aspect of it, how does that affect you? How's your recovery, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's going to be very interesting. The aspect of our psychology, equally very interesting. When you are under pressure, how do you act? decision making, how you approach difficult scenarios. I mean, every day was pretty brutal on this trip. There weren't many days or times that we sort of thought, oh, this is great. I mean, we were completely unsupported. Going into the middle of Antarctica was like going into Mordor, really. I mean, if there was a problem, you really are, you're in trouble, really. And then, so that was one side of the research. And then with the European Space Agency, we were doing this very big environmental aspect of research around Antarctica. And if you think that Antarctica is a huge ice cube, which is up to 12,000 feet thick, represents 70 million square kilometers and 90% of the world's fresh water. So keeping that in a state of good equilibrium with regard to the planet is enormously important. And so we were doing masses of tests, radiation tests, air content tests, ice density. And we did that every day as we went through. Obviously, people don't travel through the middle of Antarctica. So that data too is going to be absolutely fascinating. So yeah, really, I think all of it at the end of the day, wrapped around the aspect of what humans can do. And as I said, we're pretty amazing things when we put our mind to it. I think it's going to be really useful and hopefully add some value to important information and data that we need to collect for our current state of where planet Earth is.
Amazing. And what did you best achieve during this expedition?
Oh, there's a good question. I think from my perspective, I mean, I cut my cloth really. I was a soldier. I was in the army for about 10 years and I sailed for Britain. And I'm really interested in teams and how you get the best out of a team, really, certainly when you're doing something with a fairly clear objective. And this was an unusual trip. Obviously, it was very long. And we decided to do it as a team of two, which means there's a lot of pressure on both of you because we were unsupported. So when we started, we were carrying about 220 kilos of kit in sledges behind us. And they're funny things, teams. I mean, you can have people you have in your team because they're just very good at what they do with the objective in mind. But you might not like all of their qualities, but for what you're doing, they're perfect. But if it's a long trip, what you really want to do is try and find different kinds of aspects of what makes people work well together. And I'm a very big believer in empathy and trying to make people better so that the task at hand is something which they kind of not so much enjoy doing, but they feel that they are properly supported. And I think on this trip, Jamie, my teammate, Jamie Fraser-Charles, is a doctor, a reservist in our special forces, a very extraordinarily capable young man. And we were as near to the perfect team in that we really did. We tackled every day, albeit they were all pretty difficult, with sort of clear eyes and soft hands. And yeah, I think that is probably my takeaway. I mean, obviously it was an extraordinary privilege to be able to go and see an extraordinary continent in its rawness. I mean, we really had the kitchen sink thrown at us by Mother Nature, but you can only tackle these things if you feel that the foundation that you are operating from is as efficient as possible.
Well, you're completely reliant essentially on that other person, if something goes wrong.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So I think that's what it was. And my objective was to make him, as perfect as possible. And his was to do the same with me, with regard to what the challenges we had to go through every day, which were pretty big.
Good stuff. And Justin, with the amount of adventures under your belt, it's hard to imagine something that could startle you. But was there a part of the trip that you found harder than you initially thought?
I think It was just very long. The average temperature we had over 57 days was -37. If you think your freezer's probably -15. One day we were kiting in -62. And to do it relentlessly day in, day out, which we had to do because we were covering such a huge distance and we only had so much fuel, we only had so much food. Yeah, I think, the length of it was interesting. I mean, look, we went in with our eyes open. We certainly knew what we were, what was in front of us and what to expect. But it was a long trip. It was a long trip. We lost about 8 kilos each. You're burning between 7,000 and 8,000 calories a day, which is very difficult to put back.
Well, yeah, what were you eating? What was your diet when you were out?
Oh man, our food was fantastic, because we were really driven on science, really, and trying to make sure that we stayed at our optimum throughout. We sort of scienced the hell out of all our food. We worked with a fantastic organization, a UK organization called Firepot, who make freeze-dried food. And their boss, John Fisher, got really on board, and I pulled together a team from NASA and the European Space Agency. So looking at the individuals who look at what nutrition you should have in the International Space Station, et cetera, and we came up with some really good grub. I must say the food was fantastic. The trouble is when we were kiting, we couldn't really stop. So you have sort of 2 main meals during your day, and to try and get 7,000 calories out of that is pretty difficult. But you really do think about food a lot because you're always hungry. And it was, I must say, it was very good. It's the best. It's definitely the best freeze-dried food I've ever had in my, whatever it is, 30-something years of expeditioning. So John had done a really good job.
A part of your mission was to collect physiological readings for research.
Yep.
Is there an easy answer to what is more important when you are pushing yourself to the limit? Mental agility or physical training?
It's a good question. Again, I think it's a balance between the two. I mean, physical training, you can never train enough. I mean, I'm a huge advocate for training. And really understanding worst case scenario. So when it does appear, you at least understand or smell what the implications of it are. And so I think physical training also ties in with mental agility because, again, everything is driven from your sort of mental prowess. So I think, yes, very, very important. I think experience can be thrown into there as well. I think more of the stuff you've done, or if you haven't done very much of it, there's so much data now from people who have, who can help with how you prepare. And no, I'm a very, very keen advocate for planning and preparation. I think it's really important, certainly if you're going to step into those kind of environments. But in anything, if you put it into commercial context, I run my own business, and so I really use a lot of those tools when I look at sort of our commercial issues or problems that you might have.
And what was your training regime? How long did you train for?
Well, we were trying to do this trip last year, but the pandemic obviously stopped that. So we got an extra year, but we trained for about a year before, and obviously you've got to be quite good at kiting. So we did a lot of kiting, and yeah, it was a very, very physical undertaking, is the truth. Every day you're thumping along over very, very difficult terrain, being dragged by kites, which we always had to have a kite bigger than you would normally use because our pulks were so heavy. And so controlling those beasts is a bit of an art form. And when you've got 200 kilos behind you, it's interesting. And so you're always having some kind of minor catastrophe as you're thrown somewhere. So we had to be very strong. And so your core strength, it was important. So we did a lot of training with regard to that. We dragged a lot of tires. I mean, it's all kind of obvious stuff, really. You've got to be quite strong in your shoulders. Yeah, being robust enough to be able to take a battering every day for 2 months. So yeah, and we were lucky because we had an extra year, as I said. So we sort of, when we, and also because we're being so highly monitored, it was interesting to see how we improved and what your muscle mass to fat levels and all of those sort of your body composition. There's so much science around it now. It's fascinating. I mean, it really is fascinating how you get into peak performance, and how you try and hold on to that when it's quite rapid, aggressively being taken away from you by the extreme conditions and by the calories we couldn't put in.
And it's not in your own personal physical strength, it's teamwork too. And how important do you think teamwork was in this journey?
Imperative. I mean, literally imperative. And there's one always, when you look at teamwork, you just assume it's around the hard bits. And we are unsupported, so stuff was breaking all the time. I mean, our sledges full of stuff, which we carried or dragged along for 2,500 kilometers over very harsh terrain. Everything broke. So you're always mending stuff. So you've got to be quite capable. But I think more importantly, it's about how you kind of look after each other, because as you say, you're only as strong as your teammate. And so the aspect of really looking at that in a compassionate way, where your aim is to try and just make sure that that individual is always at his best or her best. And obviously your priority is you, and then very close to that is going to be your teammate. And it's a marriage, really. And then, you've got all your downtime. So, you don't just go to the coalface and work hard all day and then sort of you can go home and decompress somewhere else. You have to decompress together in a space which is the size of the inside of your car. And men's staff recharge, and you have to melt water. It's a continual process of quite hard work. So you have to be very clever and careful around just keeping a lid on everything and just being really as concise and caring and diligent around protecting that relationship. And in this case, we did it sublimely well. We were together for 3 months. In fact, we had to quarantine down in Cape Town, and we didn't have one crossword. And we just knew what we were doing. It helped that we're both military, so we've done lots of stuff around sort of understanding that teamwork dynamic. And yeah, it was super successful. I have to say, we got it right.
So you do it again together?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
And on that note, are you already thinking about your next adventure? And if so, can we get a hint of what that might be?
Yeah, no, very much so. I'm going to get quite vocal around sustainability and climate change. I mean, not for an egotistical perspective, but as I said, I'm in my late 50s. I have been to, I've been to the top of Everest. I've been to the North and South Pole a handful of times to both, and I've sailed around the world. So I've really seen how spectacular the world is, really, but I've also seen change, and that's quite worrying when the reality of that. I first went up to the Arctic 30 years ago, and on my last trip, it's changed. And so all this climate, the aspects of climate change are really, they're important that we address them. And I don't mean that in pointing the finger at the problem makers, but more about the solution. And we are the solution. There is a solution. And I think that I really want to highlight that. My next trip, I'm going to try and kite surf across the Atlantic. And I'm hopefully doing it with HP, and we're going to do it with a recycled. We're building this amazing hydrofoil. There's been 2 of us on it. Very, very simple, super fast, sort of like a normal kite surfing board. And I think we'll use that as a bit more of a platform to look at plastics in the ocean and again tying in with climate change and leading towards us all trying to lead a more sustainable life.
Oh, amazing. And when will that be, or is that too early to say?
I should think 2024. It's quite a big project. We've got some amazing, well, all the best sort of minds are sort of working on it now. So yeah, no, super exciting. And yeah, I mean, look, what we're trying to do, what I'm trying to do, is just really inspire people to be their best, to sort of step out of what might be a life which they kind of dream of somehow adding value or color to. And you know, anyone can do this stuff, really. I mean, I've done it for a long time, obviously, but when I started, I was just, you know, nothing special at all. I just was very interested and curious about what I could do and what was out there. And I think we can do lots of amazing stuff now, and also bang the drum for us all, you know, being a bit more responsible and responsive around what the solution is to us looking after this planet a bit better.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time, Justin.
Pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
Congratulations once again.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.